Hello and welcome to another landscape photography editing video. Today I'm gonna turn this raw file into something like that. So I saw that you guys really like the longer, more in-depth video editing tutorials, so that's exactly what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna explain everything in detail. Before I start post-processing, I just wanna give you a little bit of insight on this picture. What you see here is a picture of the quiraing on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. I've taken this picture last summer, somewhere in the afternoon I believe. I know that I've taken this picture right before a very heavy rainfall, unlike anything I've seen before. But luckily this overcast weather still had some really nice clouds that we're gonna exaggerate while editing, as well as the beautifully even lighting on the scene. Alright, so let's jump straight into it. First thing I'm gonna do is raise the shadows all the way so we have a lot of detail in the shadows. I know it kinda looks washed out for now, but I promise we're gonna fix that in a minute. Then I'm gonna drop down the highlights. Let's see how much I wanna drop them. I always like to drop down the highlights and raise the shadows. That's kind of my standard workflow for most of my pictures. So let me see here how much I wanna bring down the highlights. So we have a lot of detail in the clouds. I think that works quite well for now. Then I want to bring up the contrast a bit. I want to make sure that I don't overdo that. I think I'm gonna leave it at about plus 35 for now. Then I'm gonna bring down the blacks, hold down the Alt key so you see a mask of wherever the blacks are clipped, and bring the slider down while pressing down the Alt key. Everything that's white is not clipped in the blacks, and wherever it's starting to get some color is where the blacks are clipped. However, that's not a big deal with the blacks. Actually, I like it when the blacks are a little bit clipped. So let's see here. I think that works quite well like that. Then I feel like the overall exposure is a bit too dark, so I'm gonna raise that here in post. Let's see how much. I think about the half a stop works quite well here. Of course, if you can, always make sure you have the right exposure in camera, but I kinda missed that in camera, so I'm just gonna raise it right here in post. Really not too big of a deal if it's just half a stop, especially if you shoot RAW, and please shoot RAW. You can get so much more out of a RAW file than you could ever get out of a JPEG file. Okay then, let's bring up the whites. I'm gonna hold down the Alt key, and wherever you see any whites is where the whites are clipped. Unlike the blacks, I do not want any whites clipped, so I'm just gonna leave it right there. It may look a bit overexposed in the sky right now, but at the end, when I'm done with processing, it really helps to give a lot of dynamic and vibrance to your picture, so I'm gonna leave that there for now. Okay then, let's go to clarity. I definitely think I'm gonna raise the clarity slider here and add some clarity. I'm not sure how much I wanna add just now. I think I'm gonna add a good bit here because I really like the look of it. However, I don't want to add 100 right there. I'd rather add some more clarity in the local adjustments later, just for individual parts of the image. So I think I'm gonna leave that at plus 70. Then to Vibrance and Saturation, if you want to change any of these settings, I definitely suggest you to change the Vibrance, because it has a much more subtle approach to the color in the image, whereas Saturation totally makes it too much. It doesn't look natural at all. But for right here, I don't think I'm gonna add too much Vibrance anyways. Maybe a tiny bit. I really kinda like the not super vibrant look for this image, because I think it works quite well with all of the rocks and hills and mountains. So I'm just gonna add a little bit here. Then color temperature. I'm gonna play around with the color temperature, see if there's anything I like better. I think I'm gonna leave that somewhere around 5500 for now. I don't want to make it too warm, but also not too cold. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it right there. Then to tint, let me play around with the tint. I definitely don't want to add any magenta for this photo. In terms of greens, I think we already have enough greens. So I'm just gonna reset that by double clicking right there. Alright, so we're done with the basic adjustment. Let's move on to the tonal curve. I always like to bring up these highlight slider right here, because unlike this highlight slider up there, which pretty much affects all of the bright parts of the image, this one just affects the very highlights of your photo and can add a lot of dynamic in most of the case. So let me play around with that slider to see how much I want to add. You even can see it down here on the foreground and not just in the sky. I think I'm gonna raise it around 80. It's quite heavy and the sky is overexposed for now, but we're gonna fix that later with a graduated filter. Then to the light slider. Let's play around with that one. I kinda like it when I bring it up a bit. Not too much right here, around +10 works quite well. Then to the darks, let me see if there's anything I want to change there. I don't think I'm gonna bring them up too much. Maybe even bringing them down a tiny bit, around -5 is kind of better than 0, but not really a huge deal. Then to the shadows. Shadows are just like the highlight slider in the tonal curve. They just affect the very shadows of your picture, so it's always important to play around with these two sliders especially. Let me see here. I think I'm gonna leave that at 0. When I go plus, it kinda looks too flat. And when I go minus, I don't really have any detail right here and it starts looking ugly. So I'm just gonna reset that by double clicking on shadows. Then point curve here. This is kind of an additional contrast you can add. I usually leave that at linear because it doesn't really have a huge impact, but you could still play around with medium contrast and strong contrast, but for this case it's almost kind of too much. Let me see, between medium and linear. I actually kinda like medium contrast a bit more. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna stick with medium. And with that, we're already done with the tonal curve and the basics. If you ask me, these are the two most important modules you have in Lightroom. They absolutely add the most difference. Especially tonal curve is something that's often underestimated and not used by many people, yet it has a huge impact on your image. So let's go down to the Hsl Color Tool. You'll have here 3 separate blocks of hue, saturation and luminance. Personally, what I like to do is just click on this little dot right here, just bring it over the color you would like to change, hold down the left click and bring up and down your mouse. So let's see if there's anything I like better than the default here. I actually kinda like that very dramatic minus yellow and greens, which kinda results in a very mossy looking image. However, I think I like the greens even better, just because it kinda looks more alive and blooming. So I think I'm gonna stick with the general green here. Let me just adjust it slightly if there's any green tone that I like better. Actually, I think I'm gonna go minus just a tiny bit. So if you have any other major color, let's say a sunset with orange and pink and blues in the water, I would suggest you to go over all of these colors with that little pinpointer and just play around with the settings and see if there's anything you like better. However, there's really just mainly greens right here, so I don't have to do that. Then I'm gonna do the same thing with saturation as I did with hue. Just grab that little pinpointer, drag it over the greens and bring down and up the mouse and see if there's any setting I like better than the default. I really don't think I want to add any saturation here, and I don't want to bring down the saturation either, so I'm just gonna reset those two settings by double clicking on them and move on to luminance. Luminance, the same process as I did with the two above. Just bringing the mouse down and up. This has quite a big impact on the photo, and I'm actually not quite sure what I like better. Let's see here at minus and here at plus. I think it's kind of too much and over the top if I bring this up, and it's kind of too dark when I bring it down, so I think I'm gonna leave that setting at 0 as well. So let's move on to the split toning. Here you can add some color in the highlights or the shadows. I often do that with sunsets or sunrises. I really don't know if I'm gonna do anything right here in this photo, but it can't hurt to try out. So let me check if there's anything I like better. First in the highlights, playing around with different colors and different saturations. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna add anything there. I like it how it is. I'm still gonna play around with the shadows though, so let's see if there's anything I like better with the shadows. This is kind of too heavy, so let's go down in saturation a bit. I think I'm not gonna change anything there either, so let me just reset that to 0. Then to the detail tool. This is a very important tool, so what you wanna do is zoom in 1:1. Wait until Lightroom loads and just kinda see if there's any sharpening needed at first. Let me try out with sharpening. I don't think I'm gonna add too much sharpening, however a tiny bit couldn't hurt. Then I'm gonna zoom out again and bring the masking slider to the right while holding down the Alt key. Everything that's white is going to be sharpened and everything that's black is not going to be sharpened. So you want to make sure that you don't sharpen any skye, because if you add sharpening to something that doesn't really have any texture, you're just gonna introduce noise to your photo. So let's see here what works best for this photo. I think around 80 works quite well. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that there. The noise reduction, I would suggest you to zoom in 1:1 again, and there is definitely some noise, however it's not too much, and if I would add some noise reduction it would just kind of add a little plasticky look and get rid of a lot of the detail. So that's why I generally don't really like noise reduction, and I don't really like to add it unless I absolutely have to. So in this case I think I'm fine if I don't. Then the color slider here is a totally different story. What this will do is get rid of all of the purple and green sensor noise in the picture that you especially can see when you raise the shadows. There's not too much here right now, however there's a little bit back there, so I'm definitely gonna raise that a bit and see whenever all of the purple and green sensor noise disappears. Around 50 works quite well. I really love this tool, the color noise reduction, because it doesn't really have an effect of the overall color on the image at all. It really just removes all of the ugly sensor noise. With that said, we're already done with the detail tool, so let's go down to lens corrections. Lens corrections is usually two things I do. First thing, I go to profile, enable profile corrections, and then you want to choose your lens. This photo I've taken with the Canon 600D, which is a very entry-level DSLR, with the 18-55 kit lens. So you can see there again, it's not about the gear, it's about how you shoot and use it. So what profile correction does, it gets rid of all of the distortion and vignetting of your lens. Here you can see without and with. Definitely really nice to get rid of the distortion all the time. However, vignetting, I think that works quite well when I bring that down to 0 again, because I kinda like vignetting. It really helps to give more attention towards the center of the image, which is what you wanna look at and your viewers wanna look at, rather than the corners right here. So I think that really helps out with mood, so I often like to bring that down to 0. Then down to effects, I'm gonna add some more vignetting, so let's bring that down. I never add plus vignetting, that just looks absolutely terrible. So if you wanna add any vignetting, just bring it down a bit and see wherever you like it best. I think I'm not gonna add too much right here, around -12 works quite well. Then you could play around with the midpoint, roundness and feather, however that really doesn't have a lot of impact. Then also a setting you could play around with is grain, but I never add any grain to my pictures. I don't think there's a single image I've added grain. What this will do is just get a kind of a film look and vintage look. However, I think that looks super ugly, so I wouldn't suggest you to mess with that slider at all. And we already arrived at the camera calibration, the last global adjustment. So if you've taken your image in RAW, you'll see here a profile where you can choose between different camera profiles, and what this will do is just kind of change the color, contrast and highlights depending on which setting you're choosing, so it can't hurt to play around with these and see if there's anything you like better. Don't really like this too much. This is definitely way over the top for this photo. This is kind of too dark. Camera portrait is kind of over the top as well. Camera standard is a bit more towards the yellowish color, so I think I'm just gonna stick with Adobe standard for this photo. And then these sliders down here, they will change the primary color. So unlike the Hsl tool right here, which just affects the very color you actually see, these sliders down here will just affect the primary color, which for example means if you change your blue slider, it often will have a huge impact in your actual greens as well, because the greens have a lot of blue in it. So you can see here, even though I'm just changing the hue of the blue primary color, it changes the green tones completely. I know this is another part where many people don't even mess with these sliders, however they can have a huge impact. Usually they don't have that great of an impact, but it can't hurt to try them out. So let me play around with the sliders right here. The shadow tint slider, let's see if there's anything I like better than the current one. Not really, so I'm just gonna reset that. Red primary, if there's anything I like better there. Maybe a bit to the right. Here's at 0 and here's a bit to the right. I think I like that a bit better than at 0. Then saturation, I actually think I'm gonna make a bit of plus saturation here. Here's at 0. And here's with a bit of plus saturation, just adds even more dynamic to the image. Then down to green, let's play around with the hue. I think I don't want to change anything there, so I'm just gonna reset that, go down to saturation of the greens. I don't think I like anything better than the default there either. Maybe just a tiny bit to the right, to plus. Yeah, something like that. Then lastly but not leastly, blue primary. Here you could change the whole color of the image totally differently. I kinda like that actually, but as I said before, I kinda like the greenish look better. So I don't think I'm gonna change anything there. Then lastly, saturation. Let's see here. When I bring that down, it just kinda gets rid of a lot of the dynamic, and when I bring it up, it almost kinda makes it too much. So I think I'm just gonna bring it up slightly. I think that looks quite a bit better than 0. Really not too big of a difference, so I'm just gonna leave it at plus 15. So let me show you real quick without any color slider adjustments, and with really not too big of a difference for this photo, but it adds a little bit. Okay, so I think we're done with the global adjustments. Actually, a thing that I forgot is in lens corrections. The thing I like to do second of all after making the profile corrections is just go to color and remove chromatic aberration. And what this will do is just get rid of all of the purple and green vignetting on the high contrast edges. I think up there you could see some without any chromatic aberration removed, so let me turn that off real quick. Yeah, see that line right there? Here's with chromatic aberration reduction on, and here's without. So whenever you see a line like that in your pictures, whether it be purple or green, just press that little button on the color and the lens corrections right here, and you'll get rid of all of that. So let me zoom back out again, and we're already having a pretty decent picture. However, I'm gonna make it even better and change some local adjustments. So first thing I'm gonna do here is just grab a graduated filter and just kinda drag it over the sky right here. That's a terrible preset, so let me fix that in a second. Something like that. So you can see here the exposure is like almost -2 stops. That's definitely not what I want right here. So I'm gonna reset that real quick and just go down with the exposure until there's something I like. And you see all of those details in the cloud suddenly come in out of nowhere. So I think I'm gonna leave it at minus 0.7 stops. And then also a thing I like to play around with the sky is contrast, which you can go minus, which I really like for sunsets, but for that right here, these are stormy clouds, so I think a bit of plus contrast would work quite well here. So I think I'm gonna stick around plus 40 there. Then also a thing you could play around is the shadows. I often like to bring them up just to kind of make the shadows in the cloud a bit less obvious. So I think I'm gonna leave that about a plus 30 as well. Then to clarity, if you would edit the sunset and would like to have a very soft and silky look, you could bring that down. Because I wanna go for this very stormy feel, I think I'm gonna add some clarity here. I don't wanna make it too much. I think around 40 works quite well there. Now, as you can see, the sky is kind of very blue because we've added so much contrast to it, and I'm not quite sure if I like it. But instead of bringing some warmth into the sky, which I really don't think it looks very good, I'd rather go to saturation here and just kind of lower the saturation for the sky, so a lot of the blues go away. However, I still want a little bit of a blue touch because I think that will looks quite well compared to like almost black and white. So I think I'm gonna leave it at around minus 25. Here's at 0, really a bit too much blues, and here's at around minus 25. And I think I'm pretty much done with the sky right here, so I'm gonna close the graduated filter. And you can see there, it's really a very dynamic and highly contrasty sky, and a lot of it is thanks to this highlight slider in the tonal curve. So let me just reset the highlight slider so you can see the difference in the sky. Here's the highlight slider at 0. You can see the huge difference, so that's why I love the highlight slider so much. And here's at plus 80. Really changes the whole picture. So the next thing you want to do is straighten the horizon or change the crop if you would like, but I think this composition works quite well here, so I don't think I'm gonna crop anything there. However, I'm gonna try and straighten the horizon a little bit. Let's just see if there's anything that looks better than it was before. Let me open the history right here. Before and after. So I kinda like that, so I think I'm gonna stick with that. So again, if you have an uneven horizon, just grab this little angle tool and drag this little ruler over the horizon and it will just straighten it. This is also a thing that I see a lot of times. People with great pictures, but the horizon is absolutely crooked and it kinda ruins the whole image. So just be sure to check that the horizon is straight. Okay, so I actually really like the picture right now. However, I kind of think the foreground is a bit too flat and a bit too even. So what I want to do is add some dodge and burning. If you don't know what dodge and burning is, it's making individual parts of the image darker or brighter, which help a lot with the dynamic to the photo. You could either do this by radial filter or adjustment brush. Really choose whatever you like best. I often like to add some dodge and burning with both of these tools, however I think I'm gonna start with the adjustment brush right here. I've also made a dodge and burning guide where I explain dodge and burning in detail, so just click on the video on the screen right here and it will open the guide in a new tab. Alright, so I've selected an adjustment brush, I reset all of the settings right here, make sure the feather is at 100, then first of all I'm just gonna drop the exposure slightly, like a third of a stop, and I'm just gonna paint over the already dark parts of the photo and make them even darker. Kind of make the adjustment brush a bit smaller, maybe over there, a bit over here, something like that, like on these hills. I think down here in the foreground works quite well. Also a thing you could do is add some contrast to that. However, I think I'm gonna do that separately later. So let me just reset the contrast. Maybe paint a little bit of minus exposure over here, bit more over there. And I think that works actually quite well. So even after dodging just for half a minute, it already has a huge difference. Here's without. Then I'm gonna make a new adjustment brush, leave the exposure at minus 30, and just gonna paint over the parts of the image I want even darker, like this foreground right here, maybe some of these hills right there, something like that. Right there as well, a little bit of minus exposure right there. This didn't work quite well, so I'm gonna reset that by pressing Ctrl C, maybe over there, and I think that's pretty good. Then I'm gonna click here on new and add another adjustment brush, and this time I'm gonna bring up the exposure and just kind of paint over the parts I want even brighter. So let's see here, just kind of some lines in the rocks, maybe over there. Make sure it's not too obvious. Something like that works quite well. Maybe over there, this kind of path. Make this one a bit brighter. Maybe just some texture right here. I think that works quite well. Maybe some more there. Something like that. Over here, there, some more there, some more there. And by the way, if you've accidentally added a bit too much, you can press down the Alt key and you get the minus tool, which gets rid of the adjustment brush you've painted in that area. So that's quite useful as well. Maybe a tiny bit of more exposure there. Something like that. Maybe over here a bit more. I really think dodge and burning works wonders for this image. So I think that's actually quite good how it is right now. Maybe a bit more over there. Press down the Alt key because it was kind of too much. This one is kind of too much too, so I'm just gonna get rid of that one. Maybe here on the top of the hill a bit more. And yeah, I think I'm pretty much done with dodge and burning. Here's without any dodge and burning, and here's with. It really has a huge difference to the image. It kinda looks a bit over the top right now if you see the difference, but in 10 seconds or so you'll find it to look very natural. Actually, that reminds me, I think I'm gonna add another adjustment brush. Just go up with the exposure just a tiny bit and just drag along this road right here and make this one a bit more brighter and stand out a little bit more. Let's see how that looks. I think that might be a bit too much, so I'm gonna go down to around plus 0.05, and I think that works quite well. So when I'm looking at the picture right now, I really don't think I'm gonna add any additional local contrast or clarity, because I really like how it looks right now. A thing that I often do when I think I'm done with editing a photo is just kinda go back to the basic tool right here and play around with the major sliders like the contrast to see if there's anything I like better. But for this clarity right here, I think I'm gonna leave that where it was. Let's see, contrast. That's kind of too much. That's a bit too flat, so I think I'm gonna leave that where it was as well. So I'm actually completely done with the adjustments of my picture. An additional thing that I would do with all of my pictures is just grab the spot removal tool, zoom in 1:1 and go over the entire picture, especially sky, to make sure there aren't any dust or dirt spots, and if there are any, just remove them with the spot removal tool. Just be sure that it's on heal and not clone. That always looks way more natural. Alright, so let's check where we started at with the raw file. Go down the long history, and here's the raw file. Really insane where we started at. Really flat looking picture, not too much interest, not very much detail in the clouds and in the sky. But after about 30 minutes of editing or so, probably even less, we now have an amazing, breathtaking picture like this one. I want to thank you very much for watching this video. If you would like to see more videos just like this one, other Lightroom tutorials, landscape photography stuff, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And also, if you've enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, please give me a share on Facebook or Twitter. That helps me out a lot and is hugely appreciated. Again, thank you very much for watching. I wish you an amazing day. See you in the next episode. Take care.